Hi Matt, thanks for sending me your video. Um, I'll talk you through what I would change, why I would change it. Yeah, that was really helpful, that email that you sent with all the info on. Makes total sense. I try and keep these videos relatively simple. I totally understand that the concept of why you're doing it is because you want to get better at golf, and the stuff I give you has got to be doable in terms of drills and for you to understand it. So if I start off first of all by talking what's called I generally use something called the P system in golf, um, which is just referencing certain positions in the golf swing. So position number one is setup. Okay. Position number two is where the shaft is parallel to the ground on the way back. In terms, I'll just show you that one first of all. So it would be just miss it, but the shaft will be parallel sort of here. Okay, so it's probably not a bad idea. Just pop it into YouTube and familiarize yourself with the P system. There'll be somebody on there just demonstrating the different positions. Okay, so ultimately controlling the club path and the swing direction, I can see from the video that it's very rightward. Okay, I'm sure you've been told to swing left. You need to try and feel like you're going to fade the ball more, all those sorts of things. But for me, where I would first start off is where and what your pelvis does. Okay, I've just drawn this line on from setup. Let's go back to a setup position, keeping it dead simple. What you normally find with really good players, if you can draw a line down the back of their arm or armpits, um, it touches their knees. Okay, so I've just drawn it on Tiger on the right hand side. So I'm not going to say to you stand closer, if that makes sense. But if I was kind of on a one-to-one lesson with you here, what I would do is I would move the ball just back to here. Okay, and what that would do is it would reduce this forward bend here. Okay, so your forward bend would reduce and your arms would sit back closer to your knees. Okay, or effectively, the space between the grip and your trousers would reduce, like this one on the right hand side here. Okay, so that is the first kind of bullet point, number one. That's what I would change from the setup position. I wouldn't really change anything else from down the line or from the side on video, which we'll go through in a minute. Okay, so you talk a little bit about your backswing. So if we move it from position one into position two, which is where the shaft is parallel to the ground, which is here. Okay, so all the good stuff that we look for. Okay, a lead arm that moves slightly in of a 90-degree angle, club face angle that sits square to the arc that you're swinging on. Okay, so I wouldn't change this. And really, right up to the top, I wouldn't really fiddle too much with what you're doing on your backswing. You don't swing the club too far inside, and you get into a nice position at the top. You get this nice sensation of the club shallowing. The angle when you get lead arm parallel to the ground on the way down. Sorry, this is which is here. Okay, you get the shaft putting outside the line of the ball, which is what all great players do. So I wouldn't mess around with anything really in terms of what the club's doing. Okay, what you need to change is how your pelvis works in the golf swing. Okay, that is what's causing you a lot of pain. So I've just drawn this line on here on the left hand side. Let's get this back to square here. Okay, because it's not a fixed camera, the lines become slightly irrelevant. So I've drawn this line to start off with here on your back side, but if I just put you into your impact position, okay, and all this arrow is pointing to is a divot that becomes in view here, if you like. Okay. So I can't really use this line, as I say, because it's not a fixed camera. Your man's done a pretty good job of holding it still. But just to give you an idea, okay. So again, if you can see, this yellow line is just on this divot here. And if I put you into a impact position, the amount that pelvis works forward and kind of under the rib cage is excessive, let's say. Now obviously, you know, you're a good player. You mentioned you've got your back injury. This will not affect your back injury. If anything, you know, the feeling of the early extension of the spine is only going to make it more painful for lower vertebrae in the body. Okay, so again, I've used Tiger because obviously he's gone through the same injury as yourself. Okay, so what do you need to do to effectively change this? All right, so if I go up to the top of the swing, what you can see, let's take these lines off, is the initial movement of his pelvis, okay, is to go into what's called an anterior tilt, okay, which is it bends down more this way, or his belt buckle feels like it's pointing more down at the ground. This is the initial transition movement that needs to happen, okay. So this is like the second big bullet point for you. So the feeling is that belt buckle, again, this is not a fixed camera, but you can see it lowers, okay, lowers. It moves more into a pointing down at the ground position. Yours does exactly the opposite, okay, it moves upward, so it does it goes into what's called posterior tilt. So again, I'll go back to here. Again, because it's not a fixed camera, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the line up here. What we're going to use is that guy's right leg over here, okay. So if you notice, as he turns, okay, and goes into an impact position, which is here, right, there has been no shift forward, and I mean forward as in this way, with his pelvis, okay. It has stayed back on that line, right, or it has stayed level with that guy's leg in the background. Yours moves forward dramatically, okay. That is why your club path, your swing direction, will be excessively to the right. That is why the club feels like it gets stuck behind you, okay. Until you move and change the position that your pelvis is making in the downswing, you will continue to swing it excessively to the right, okay, which will then alter your low point, okay. So how are you going to feel that? Again, from position one, the only thing I'm going to change is a little bit in setup by the arms being closer to yourself, or the ball will be close to your body, and you're going to feel less forward bend, so you're going to go more onto this line here, okay. You're going to go up to the top, okay. Sorry, that's the one. Right. Now, where you are at the top of the swing, again, from tour players that I've seen, literally 100% of them have got 90% of pressure in the trail foot, in the heel specifically as well, okay. So what you're going to feel from this position now is, if you think the first part that moves forward, okay, is your right hip starts to move off the line, and you see here at the pressure now, if we pressure mapped it, it would be excessively in this toe, okay, and that's what enables that right hip to move forward. And obviously now you can see that this pelvis has started to move forward, and the divot becomes viewable in the picture. If I go more into this one, you can see how the right heel, it's marginally off the ground, but the knee is not kicked forward into the ball, right? And what is happening is his left buttock is moving back and around, okay. So the feeling, if you're kind of standing up, instead of you rotating the right hip, I want you to feel like the left hip is almost going back and behind you, okay, while you're keeping that right heel planted on the ground for a lot longer, okay. So again, if we go into this position, So you can see the difference in positions with the right foot. If you were to copy this, okay, again, it's not a bad way of doing it. You can see how that right knee is just bumped forward. Pelvis now goes excessively underneath. So you can use the term early extension if you want, okay. But most people early extend the hips because the shaft is too steep on the way down. That is not the case for you. You don't really need to worry too much about what the club is doing. In order to get an improved swing direction, is what you would call it, you need to control the hips a lot better. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense from a front on position. From a down the line position. So if we move it into a front on position, so just bear with me a minute. I'll bring this on. And again, from the front on position, it's really working on the same things, but what I will give you is some visuals, so when you video it again yourself, you can start to gain an idea of what it should look like. Okay, so again, from setup here, I don't really have any issues with that whatsoever. I don't know enough to contradict anything that you're doing there. Okay. So again, obviously, just because it's not a fixed camera, I'll draw the line, but I really want you to kind of reference. So what we'll use is we'll use this tree stump in the background here. Okay. So from a front on position, because the pelvis moves so far underneath your rib cage, what you'll get the impact here is the left knee collapsing, and again you can see how you've shifted even before you hit the ball. All the pressure's moved excessively into the outside of that right foot, and that left hip is a long way past that left foot. Okay, so this probably should make a little bit more sense when I talk about how to get the left hip feeling like it almost moves back and around. So from here you can see it address, obviously his left hip sits on the inside of his left foot. There is a lateral shift, okay, but you can see now how that left hip is turning, okay. And then what that enables him to do is hold on to this angle for a lot longer, okay. So you only lose a little bit of lag or angle in the shaft just because you're moving forward so much, okay. So if you look at these two positions, they're virtually exactly the same, okay. Don't worry what this club looks like. It doesn't do that. It's just because the camera can't keep up with the speed that you're swinging. It's a bit like if you're on the motorway and you look at an alloy wheel next to you, it's obviously not going backwards, but it looks like it's going backwards again because your eyes can't keep up with what's going on. So most people send these and they go, oh my god, my shafts are they're not stiff enough, etc., etc. But it's not. It's just shaft droop. You see it all the time unless you've got a ridiculously good high-speed camera. So again, from here you can see the left heel is a lot more planted. Your left heel starts to come up because the pressure's moved too far into the outside of your left foot. But what you should start to see is if you start to move the hips correctly from the down the line kind of point where you're getting that left hip to rotate, feel like the right foot here stays more planted and is more of a roll rather than the pressure going into the toe. This will start to correct itself. So again, you can see there's a lot of movement with that right hip coming under. Back. Again, obviously, the more you move forward, the harder it is to judge the low point. I'm not saying you're going to get steeper or you're going to get shallower. For me, most better players who get a little bit forward with their pressure or their centre of mass generally tend to do what you do and just lose a little bit of wrist angle. So you generally tend to pick the ball off more off the turf rather than actually become really, really steep. But again, if you look at the difference in that left leg versus your left leg, you can see that they are significantly different there. Um, so yeah, that's my initial thoughts of where I would go. So really kind of just getting the lesson right down to what needs to be changed, and it's the movement of the pelvis. I'll put some clips that my friends have done that are coaches underneath this video, so again you can kind of get the sensation and the feeling of what you're trying to do. I would definitely look at things like body track pressure mapping and start to gain an understanding of where the pressure should be in the golf swing and in your feet. I think that will help you. So it's got to be a little bit more technical because you're obviously a really good player anyway. But you know yourself. We're only talking 2 shots. If you can get from scratch to +2, you'd be absolutely made up with that. But we both know as golfers, it's a hell of a lot harder than what it sounds. So do you need to change loads? No, absolutely not, because you're a reasonable player. But if I was being deadly honest from my point of view and I looked at your swing, okay, I would say, wow, okay, if this guy's playing off scratch and he's doing those particular movements, there's actually a lot of scope for going forward, which is obviously good for you, even though I've kind of slagged it off a little bit there. But yeah, absolutely any questions at all, Matt, just let me know.